Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar. This is the first webinar in 2024, and it's titled, Take It Outside, Expand Your Business with Outdoor Installation. Very excited about this. I'm Jim Olson with the National Tile Contractors Association, and I'm welcoming you and thanking you for taking time out of your busy schedule to attend today's webinar sponsored by Daltile. Before I introduce today's speaker, there is some business I need to run through with you. I want to remind you that you'll be muted, and please use the questions area on your computer to type in your question. As you're going through this, you may have questions. Do not hesitate to type a question in, and we'll try to answer all of those questions at the end of this presentation. If the audio on your computer is poor, call the number on the invite to this webinar and listen on your phone. All of our NTCA webinars are available to watch at any time on the NTCA YouTube channel shortly after the webinars are presented, giving you easy access to watch and or share all current and past programs at your convenience. All right, here we go. Very excited to introduce today's speaker. Bill Graves is the sales director for Daltile's exterior program of outdoor living products. He has been in the hardscape industry for 22 years and has extensively traveled North America for work and has been on job sites in all climates and soil conditions. More recently, he has followed his daughter overseas for international gymnastics competitions and has observed outdoor segmental paving projects in 5 European countries. He lives in Dallas, Texas with his wife, 3 children, and their 150-pound yellow lab, Great Pyrenees dog. I love that, Doug. Phil is a 1994 graduate of the United States Military Academy at West Point, New York, and served 5 years in the United States Army. Phil, thank you for your service, and we welcome you.
Thank you very much, Jim. And putting my service, I'll tell you the way I like to answer that compliment or that expression of gratitude now is America is worth it. And I truly believe that. So I was happy to do it, and it was a great job. And hello to everyone else on the call. Welcome. Thank you for taking some time out of your day to get a little dose of some information about outdoor living areas and installation options and different products, et cetera, et cetera. So I've done a couple of these now for the NTCA. The most recent one was last July, and have primarily focused on the 2-centimeter porcelain pavers. But I want to change it up a little bit on this call. I'm still going to talk a decent amount about the porcelain pavers, but really kind of want to focus on just the opportunity for outdoor installations. So horizontal installations, vertical installations, different products other than 2cm porcelain pavers. And then we'll move into a little bit more porcelain talk, just because some installation options or installation types are not suitable for a thin tile, for example. You just need something a little bit stronger. So let's get started. As Jim mentioned, I have been following our daughter around Europe the last 3 years. And when I go to these countries, I'm a paver nerd, right? I'm a segmental paving nerd. So I take a lot of pictures everywhere I go. So we'll do a little clockwise, starting at the top left, this pink place over here. That's a residence. That's a residential driveway. And that's a segmental paving that's all natural stone. In this case, it's just set over flexible pavement or a compacted aggregate base and jointed with sand, essentially. The next picture over to the right on the top, that is in Sofia, Bulgaria, and that's all bonded product. I think this one was a combination of tile and natural stone tiles, but everywhere, as far as the eye can see, it's segmental paving over there. On this right, the skinny one on the right-hand side here, that is in Budapest, Hungary. And that is 600,000 square feet of concrete and natural stone paving, all segmental. Bottom middle, that is Birmingham, UK. And we were just there right around Thanksgiving of this last year. And again, every single place you go is nothing but segmental paving. All the older paving was concrete pavers over flexible base or compacted aggregate. And most of the new products that they have were either natural stone, dimensional cut stone, or were some sort of porcelain. and all bonded applications. And you can see it's a very large area for a bonded application. And then let's go over here to the bottom left. This is the capital city of Azerbaijan. The city is Baku. And if you don't know where Azerbaijan is, it's just south of Russia and just north of Iran. And in this case, this is all bonded porcelain tile. And get this, it's 16 miles of bonded porcelain tile, sort of their version of a boardwalk, except for, instead of doing boards, they went with ceramics. So a very large and very impressive installation indeed. So that's what's out there, gang. I mean, there's tons and tons and tons of opportunity for outdoor installations, and just even since the pandemic, people have been focusing their attention on going outside a lot more than they used to, and it was already a very strong trend upwards for decorative outdoor living spaces. If you look here, the hardscape industry, so this doesn't really even count, like poured concrete, even stamped and stained concrete. This is basically just segmental paving, and it's about $3.5 billion wholesale annually. So it's a very large market, and I'm going to give you some more numbers here in a little bit. But it's a very, very large market, and it's still on a very aggressive upward trajectory of growth, especially since the pandemic. And more commercial spaces are focusing on, outdoor spaces where you can go enjoy the outside, get some vitamin D, maybe distance if you have to. We don't really do that anymore, thankfully. But the other big trend right now that we see is these pedestal roof decks. Now, pedestal roof decks aren't anything new. Concrete pavers and natural stone have been put on pedestals on roof decks for decades. But the pandemic sort of pushed it where it became more popular. And then when porcelain pavers came out, and it's a lighter material, very, very decorative with a durable aesthetic, so it's not going to fade, stain, or scratch, they really accelerated the amount of roof decks going in. And now if you own a commercial property like a residential high-rise condo unit or an apartment building, you're not in the game unless you have a rooftop for people to gather. Because if you do have the rooftop, keep your tenants, right? You attract tenants and then you keep your tenants. So you can see why they would be attracted, because it's a cool space. You take the tour of the condo and you go up on the roof and you're like, wow, this is unbelievable. Look at the view of the city, etc. But what happens is it becomes a community, right? So people make friends, and then people make memories, and people have relationships, and they don't want to leave when the lease is up. So even if you're on the third floor, you still get a piece of the penthouse, the roof deck, and then you end up with more of a community than most these sort of group living or multifamily kind of properties typically are. So now everybody kind of knows everybody in the building, which isn't really the case typically. So roof decks are kind of easy money because it's going to go in. Just what's the product, what's the pedestal that's going to be used, and who's the person that's going to install it. And honestly, really a fairly straightforward and simple installation process, especially compared to to bonding, to the waterproofing layer on the roof deck and the drainage mat and everything you have to do, and then you're worrying about the slope and maybe some envelope cuts to get to the drain. With the pedestal system, it's all open jointed and perfectly flat and level. So a couple big trends there. And then let's look and just sort of price out a typical job indoors versus outdoors. So if you're inside kitchen, if you look versus an outdoor kitchen, essentially, looking at just material price and cost, same amount, right? 500 square feet of one versus 500 square feet of the other. And then a mosaic inside versus a mosaic outside. The materials tend to be more expensive for outdoor environments because the outdoor environment is rougher on materials. But look, in material markup alone, you've got double the margin dollars. So you go from $865 to over $1,700 in margin. So these jobs are lucrative. And if you're going out there, let's say it's not a 2cm, let's say it's a textured floor tile, and you're going to bond it. In a bonded application, you're using the exact same labor and basically the exact same equipment and the exact same setting and grout materials, but a little bit different, right? You're doing it the same way, but these are going to be a higher end type of setting material and grout material. But otherwise, pretty much same on how to install. So what do you have to think about when you go outside? I like this. It's so simple. There's really only two things. precipitation is going to happen, so it might get slippery. So you want to have a product, whether it's a natural stone, a concrete paver, a textured floor tile, a 2cm porcelain paver, whatever it is, that has reasonably good slip and skid resistance. Now, residentially, it doesn't matter. That's just a buyer beware issue. But we still don't want to see anybody get hurt. So texture is preferred, and then if you're going commercially, texture is required. So that slip and skid is a concern, something you have to think about going outside. So probably not polished tile. And then the temperature is variable, right? It's not 72 all the time like it is inside. So freeze thaw cycles really play a big role if you're doing a bonded application and dictating sort of what level of grout and what level of setting materials or mortar you want to use. And the reason for that is if water gets into, it penetrates or soaks into the grout, and even worse, say water makes its way into the setting layer and you're in a freezing environment and that water freezes, it'll expand roughly 10% as it freezes, and it'll push, right? It'll push in that gap between the slab and the tile that's bonded to it, and eventually you pop tiles. So you got to have the right setting and grout when you're going outside and bonded applications. And let's look, well, where do I live? Is freeze thaw an issue? Well, if you live in the United States, 95% of it, yeah, it's an issue sooner or later, or 85% of it. And if you live over, say, in Denver or Salt Lake City, it's a significant issue. And let's look at this too, because you're saying, well, some of these areas don't seem like, I would think like Minnesota, Wisconsin, Upper Peninsula, Michigan, those would be more. Cycling is the issue. It freezes, it thaws, it freezes, it thaws. So the more times that happen, the more destructive it becomes. In places like, say you're in Minneapolis, St. Paul up here, you get the same amount of freeze thaw cycles as somebody in Virginia, which is shocking. But what happens is it gets cold up here and then it stays cold, right? So it doesn't cycle as often as some of these other areas like Denver, where it can be 70 in the middle of the day, and then here comes a snowstorm, right? And the temperature drops 40 degrees, and then it goes right back up again to 50 as soon as the squall passes through. So looking at this map kind of helps you select products for your setting materials and your grout materials. So let's talk about some options for horizontal surfaces. I want to call this product out real quick. This is a full color range Pennsylvania bluestone imaged on 2cm porcelain. So this is actually porcelain that if you put it side by side next to the product it was imaged from, you basically wouldn't be able to tell the difference other than texture. So what kind of surfaces can you use, stone, concrete, tile, whatever, for outdoor environments? Pretty much anything, right? Rooftops, outdoor kitchens, work from home in the backyard space, your driveway and porte-cochere. That's right. It can be vehicular, absolutely. Pool decks, walkways, countertops. Don't sleep on countertops, because outdoor kitchens are a very big thing, and outdoor countertops, you have to be careful about what material you're using for it, right? A lot of natural stone, if you're in a freeze-thaw environment that's uncovered, it could suffer damage from freeze-thaw cycling. Same with a concrete countertop. You can't do like a quartz countertop because it'll turn yellow in the sun. It's a UV issue. So there are some considerations for your countertop material as well. But outdoor kitchens are huge, right? I mean, everybody's getting an outdoor kitchen now, and it can be incredibly lucrative for you. Some vertical spaces for outdoor environments. This first picture kind of came out a little bit wonky, but that's a outdoor pizza oven. And if you don't know about these things, they're everywhere. Like because of the fact that I've been in the hardscape industry for 22 years, my Facebook feed is littered with hardscape contractors across the country, and these pizza ovens are popping up constantly. So that's just one thing you can do. Feature walls, like look over here. This is a glass mosaic that is absolutely stunning. You might think, oh, that's typically what I would use for like a waterline tile for the pool, but you don't consider that, no, you can make like a privacy wall and then make that privacy wall look absolutely stunning. And you've got seating walls, water features, fire features, tons and tons of vertical surfaces outdoors to which you can apply, some sort of tile, stone, whatever, that is incredibly durable, very beautiful, and very low maintenance over time. If we're going back to horizontal installations, what are the types of installations that you can do? So above grade on pedestals, we talked about a little bit already. Above grade on deck framing, on grade on flexible base, or on grade bonded. And those are your 4 basic categories for different types of outdoor horizontal surface applications. So when would we want to go thin with the tile outdoors? We can only do it if it's a bonded application. You can't do it on a flexible base or a pedestal. It doesn't have the breaking strength to handle those applications. I also wouldn't put it on an elevated deck if you're going to do an unbonded application, which you can do with thicker, stronger materials. If you're going thin, though, and you're going outside, as we mentioned very early on, you need that high dynamic coefficient of friction so you avoid the slip and falls, proper setting and grout materials, and there you go. That's thin tile outside. Now, you can put floor tile vertical outside, too, and I've seen a lot of applications like that that are really beautiful, like a wood look floor tile. You can go right over a brick wall at the side of your garage and make something really pretty for a backyard area. So direct bond opportunities. I think my favorite opportunities for direct bond really are existing concrete slabs, simple overlay, a back patio. So this bigger picture here used to basically look like the top picture, right? Just a builder pad. And pretty much every tract home builder throws down at least a 10-foot square, a 10 by 10 concrete pad out back. Great, and there's almost always plenty of room, clearance at the door, right? So a very good opportunity for thin tile with good slip and skid resistance to go in an outdoor environment. Money. For instance, on this bottom picture, this is actually thin floor tile, and then you see a little strip of turf. That the thin floor tile is over the existing slab. And we came out here, we did some 2-centimeter porcelain pavers over a compacted aggregate base. And in this case, it's the same look in the 2cm in the floor tile. So you can have that. The floor tile can even go in the house, obviously. So you can have that indoor-outdoor design harmony. And a lot of the, by the way, a lot of these vertical mosaics that coordinate with these floor tiles, if they're porcelain, you got the right setting and grout material, you can go vertical with those all day long too. So imagine, well, we got floor tile right here on the front of this little kitchenette, and that could be going. You could wrap these brick columns with it too. Just a lot of really cool options for outdoor applications. You can see some of these direct bond things that you can do. Yes, driveways, direct bond with thin tile. You can do. Just go into any reasonable high-end car dealership. Cars parked all over the place, indoors on tile, bonded to a slab. And then when to go thick? You can direct bond 2cm porcelain pavers or a thick natural stone all day long outdoors too. But in some applications, you'll need a thicker, stronger product. So we say vehicular traffic always. I just told you that you can bond a thin tile. That's true. You can bond a thin tile. That's no big deal. The vehicular traffic with a thicker tile, it's a little bit more sturdy, a little bit more hardy. But for raised flooring, so that's elevated decking or pedestal applications, and then flexible base, for sure, you got to have the breaking strength to go over a flexible base, which is an unbonded application. So I call out Stepwise here, that's a brand, but any textured thin tile or something with improved slip and skid resistance is okay if you're bonded, which we've already talked about. So turning our attention back to 2cm porcelain pavers for the next number of slides. You guys know pretty much everything that's on this slide already, but your most common looks are stone, wood, and concrete. But you can have virtually any look because essentially it's just a picture that's printed on top of the tile. As previously mentioned, more and more porcelain pavers have a coordinating thin floor tile for indoor-out design harmony. We talked about vertical porcelain veneers on a previous slide. And what I'd call out here is trim profiles are available. So if you have, say, a pool coping and you want your tile to be the coping as well, you can just miter. Most places they'll do this for you or have somebody sub it out to a fabrication shop, but you can miter the edge and then put a front return on it so that it looks thicker and you have a finished face around the inside of the pool. You put a mitered front return that's only 2cm thick on like one long side of the tile and use it as step nosing, right? So stair treads. And then literally, as long as you're within the constraints of the size of the field tile, you can make pretty much anything as long as it's not curvy. Right? You can't bend the tile. We can't stretch the tile. So I've seen people make actual full steps, right? Like a 7-inch step on the side and the front, or one long side and 2 short sides on like a 16 by 48 2cm porcelain paver. And now you've got a lightweight stair unit that you can place outside really easily. So some really cool things available with these products. So here on this slide, a favorite of mine, if you look across the top, these are all materials that you can use for outdoor decorative paving. And the 4 on the right are sort of the legacy materials, natural stone starting all the way to the right, centuries, right, eons of paving with natural stone. And you've got concrete pavers, which kind of has the bulk of the market in North America, at least, for outdoor decorative paving. And you've got cast in place concrete, which is typically stamped and stained. And then back to segmental paving here with clay brick pavers. And then finally, new kid on the block, porcelain pavers. If you look down the left-hand side of this chart, you'll see some performance characteristics that every one of these materials has to have to some degree in order to be suitable for use in an outdoor environment. And of course, the more harsh your environment is, the more important it is for some of these characteristics. Like if I'm in Miami, Florida, I can use a very delicate marble and not worry about it, right? It's going to be fine because we're not going to have the freeze thaw issues. If I use a delicate marble in a front walkway in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and I put ice melt on it, by springtime I got a marble gravel walkway, right? I mean, it's just going to completely fall apart. So looking at these performance characteristics, they all have the ability to handle these things to one degree or another. But porcelain pavers now, as the newer material, really sweeps the field. And it's because of this high density, right? So concrete paver by industry standard is allowed to absorb up to 5% salt water immersed in the solution over 24 hours. Same or similar kind of testing for porcelain. In order to be certified porcelain, it can only absorb up to 0.5%. So 10 times more water gets into a concrete paver allowable by industry standards than porcelain does. And a lot of porcelain's testing out at 0.1 or 0.2. I mean, really almost completely impervious. And that means it's not going to stain. I mean, you can't even seal it. And then other performance characteristics, UV resistance. It's not going to fade. Over time, concrete does. Brick doesn't. It's a fired earth product. Natural stone doesn't. Obviously, it's a natural product. But your concrete will fade with time in the sunlight. Scratch resistance, porcelain runs the field on it's an 8 on the Mohs scale. Diamond is 10, and that's the hardest material. So basically, when it comes to scratch resistance, nothing is, dragging your metal furniture across your patio is not going to mar the surface at all. Because it doesn't absorb anything, it's completely freeze thaw proof. Because it doesn't absorb anything, when you put ice melt on it and the ice turns to water, and it doesn't turn to water, it turns to salt water. If that soaks in to like a concrete substrate, when that water eventually evaporates, the salt is left behind in solid state, and that salt will eventually crystallize and grow, and it'll start spalling the surface of a more porous material. Will not happen with porcelain. Acid resistance, if I poured diluted muriatic acid onto concrete, it's going to start foaming. It's going to foam immediately. It'll even smoke a little bit, and the foam will be the color of the pigment that used to be in the concrete and now is about to be rinsed away. If I pour a whole bottle of undiluted muriatic acid onto a porcelain paver, nothing will happen. It'll look like I'm pouring tap water on top of the paver. So really incredibly durable product for outdoor use. And then if we look at compressive strength, this doesn't really matter for a bond or for a fully supported application, right? So even if you're on compacted aggregate, your compressive strength doesn't really matter. But the concrete paver industry likes to point to it because it's like twice as much or 3 times as much as a lot of poured concrete out there, and they use that as a way to differentiate themselves. So we decided to test compressive strength on porcelain pavers, and this is a very conservative number. Some of it was way above 30,000 psi. So it doesn't matter. really, when it's supported. However, if somebody wants them to have some bragging rights, the porcelain pavers are through the roof. Now, all these great performance characteristics come in a very freight and labor friendly, roughly 9 pounds per square foot. So if you're like 27 pounds per square foot on concrete pavers, that means I get 3 times the square footage on a truck. So I don't have as much freight into my product. And then say it's 1,000 square feet. Even though a single porcelain paver weighs more than a small, like 6x9 porcelain or concrete paver, you're still moving the amount of weight over the course of a job. So 1,000 square foot job, we're 9,000 pounds of porcelain, we're 27,000 pounds of concrete. And in the concrete paver world, because the porcelain came on with these larger format products, now the concrete pavers are large format too. That means they have to be thicker for breaking strength. Now they're up to 36 pounds a square foot at least. And now you have to have tens of thousands of dollars worth of vacuum equipment to move these things around on a job site. So one of the many reasons why porcelain is gobbling up some share of that outdoor decorative paving market. All right, back to pedestals. We're still on 2cm or natural stone or concrete at this point, but again, growing really, really rapidly in popularity. It gives you a functional space that's completely flat over what would otherwise be a low slope roof. And it's completely free draining and relatively easy to install once you get the first your T lined up, right? Your center one and your T off of it, it plops into place really quickly after that. And then there are a lot of different pedestals on the market, and more recently there's been more that came to market, and some of them are a lot more progressive, a lot more functional than some of the more legacy pedestals. So a lot of them now have self-leveling heads. So if you have tiles or stones that are of the same weight resting on the head, and the pedestal is going to be sitting on a slope. So now when you put these things on there, they will actually self-level, typically up to about 5% slope compensation. But that makes it a lot faster to install, because if you have a fixed head pedestal that does not automatically compensate for slope, you're going to have to shim every single pedestal. So these self-leveling heads have made things a lot faster and easier. And now we have a lot of pedestals that come with a key that you can shove a key down and raise or lower the height of the pedestal, even while you have pavers sitting on it. So that precludes you from having to pick up a paver, put it off to the side, adjust your pedestal, hope you got it right, put the paver back on it, throw the level on it, see if you got it right, cross your fingers. If you didn't, you're moving it again. So a lot more labor, a lot more time, and a lot more wear and tear on the crew that way. Now, above grade on deck framing, I like this one a lot too, especially the second portion that I'm going to tell you about. But above grade on deck, elevated deck framing is really cool with porcelain, because now you can have that indoor-outdoor design harmony upstairs, and you can have your deck and, say, your walkout patio below that sort of above and below design harmony too. So for instance, we've got these wood look tiles on this deck. They didn't do it, but this whole walkway could have been exactly the same. So a very nice aesthetic and design element. Now, remember I said at the beginning that the hardscapes market is about $3.5 billion annually. Are you aware that the deck market is about $7 billion annually? So it's double that. And there are some underlayment products available for both steel and wood framed decking. So you got to have that fall through protection, right? You can't just span the joists that are 12 or 16 inches on center with porcelain. If somebody goes out there and drops something that's sufficiently hard and heavy enough, the porcelain breaks and somebody's going to go through. We don't want that. So there are underlayment products available on the market for use. And this is even, I don't mean, go with 3/4 inch plywood with cement board and waterproofing and all that. If you have just a regular Trex or composite deck or a wood deck, the rain goes right through it, right? It's just deck boards, it's flats. You can do the same thing with porcelain with the right underlayment for fall through protection, but that way you don't have to do such an involved assembly. You can pretty much get it done for maybe 10% more than a high-end like Trex deck. And now you've got a deck surface that's not going to ever catch on fire. It won't cup, it won't fade, it won't warp, you won't get a sliver from it, you don't have to sand it or stain it. It's kind of maintenance free. You go out there with a hose and you're good. Now, second part, this other picture up here in the top right corner, that is basically a very low pedestal. If you have an existing wood or composite deck and you've got enough clearance at the door, you can overlay that deck in a day and be done. The only thing you have to worry about is when you get out to the end of the deck, you're going to have a taller fascia board so that it will, it'll be perimeter containment. It'll constrain those outside pavers so they won't creep away from each other. So very easy money on that one. If you've got the room at the door, you can overlay with a PCM porcelain paver and a like or similar product to these low pedestals in the upper right hand corner. On-grade flexible base, not typically in the wheelhouse of the tile contractors, but sometimes it is because it's an adjacent type of installation. The only thing that's really different is you're either going to have to sub out excavation or there's going to have to be an equipment purchase to be able to do the excavation. But there's different ways to do this. You can have what's called a dense graded aggregate base where you've got particles that are about 3/4 of an inch to an inch in diameter all the way down to very fine particles. So when you install that and you compact it and you wet it and you get it really good and tight, it becomes very, very much like a concrete. It becomes really, really hard. And then you would put a bedding layer of sand over it typically, and there's a certain gradation that you have to adhere to for the sand. And that's the way people install concrete pavers all day long. With porcelain, I'm not a big fan of the sand as a bedding layer. I prefer a chip stone, sort of what's called a number 8 or a number 9, and then there's a number 89, which is just a blend of those two sieves. And it's a more structural setting bed than sand for porcelain because porcelain's not an interlocking pavement. The pavers don't touch each other. If there's a little bit of warpage and you step on a corner and it's a sand set, you might have a little bit of movement. Not much, but a little bit. With a chipstone bed, you don't really get the movement, which makes it a little bit healthier for your joint material if you use joint material as well. So what differentiates it, though, from some other installations that you're more familiar with is, for example, here these are permanent spacers. And it's basically the same product as that previous overlay product I told you about for decks. This one's just thinner, but they have to stay there for the life of the install if you're doing it unbonded over compacted aggregate. And that's because you can't have the pavers bumping into each other. If they do, they'll chip. And you also have to have an edge restraint for perimeter containment, which could be concrete, it could be a subterranean curb that you bond onto. There's plastic and metal edge restraint options on the marketplace. You just have to have something to keep the pavers from moving apart from each other. So they don't want them to move together and you don't want them to move apart. And then finally, your joint material is going to have a degree of flexibility in it, so we don't use cementitious grout for what's otherwise a flexible pavement, or it will crack and break and come out with time. Speaking of time, I'm just going to do a quick check. Looks like I'm good. On-grade vehicular permeable. This is bonded also, so I threw this one in because it's different than bonding to a concrete slab or an existing slab or pouring a slab and then using mortar and grout. Newer product. It's a newer product to the U.S. All right, it's been used in Europe for well over 30 years, but a really neat assembly that allows for freeze thaw because you end up sort of screeding out chip stone, so that same number 8, number 9, number 89 stone, but you put a binding agent in the gravity mixer, and now it becomes something that you screed out like you normally would, but because of that bonding agent, it will cure out to be basically a porous concrete slab. But you don't have any steel in it, you don't have to put any reinforcement in it, and you don't have to form and pour anything in this case. So it's more adjacent to the way a hardscaper would typically install the setting bed. But in this case, you bond the tile just with a thin set. In different companies have their own names for it, and different companies want you to use theirs, so you get the full system all branded. But basically, it's a thin set. So you thin set the back of the tile, you bond it wet on wet, right, to this sort of porous concrete slab. So you bond it wet on wet. You don't need permanent spacers. You don't need edge restraint because the entire system is a bonded system. Then you come back the next day and you wet squeegee in a specific type of joint compound that also remains permeable. So you're not on your hands and knees packing grout joints in this case. You're with a squeegee and a hose, and so it goes in incredibly easily. And this picture over here, this job site is all 2CM. This is that same one picture from earlier, the full color range Pennsylvania bluestone. But these pavers are set on a similar system. The joints on the broken mosaic veneer on this fire pit are done with another product that's like and similar to what's underneath the pavers. And so it's very, very just useful. It's I'm missing a word right now, guys. I'm sorry, but it's versatile. That's the word I was looking for. And then it can capable of handling vehicular traffic as well, but it still allows water to percolate down into what ought to be an open graded base in this case, so that water can eventually percolate back down into the ground. You keep the storm water on the site where it falls. You don't run it off the pavement through the yard, picking up fertilizer and pollutants and getting into the gutter, making its way into the storm sewer system, where those pollutants obviously go right out into our tributaries, river streams, lakes, etc. So a lot of municipalities, by the way, especially when you get into coastal areas, are mandating a certain percentage of, say, a residential home lot has to be permeable, right? So if you've got, say, a long, skinny lot and you got a big house on the end of it, and you put a concrete driveway down the middle of it, you maybe can't put in a pool, or maybe your house has to be smaller because it takes up too much percentage of impervious cover. With a system like this, you can have a long driveway, porcelain, stone, concrete, whatever, with permeable joints. Water goes through as long as it meets a certain infiltration rate that the municipality decides or decrees. Now it doesn't count against your impermeable cover of your property. So really neat for that. Now, everybody asks, porcelain paver over something I never heard of, this new installation system, is it durable? Well, let's take a look. So is it durable? Yes, it's very durable. So a really neat system. And I'm going to leave you guys with this. And Jim, I'll be happy to send you this link after we're done. But I've got a playlist on YouTube for educational video content for more information about outdoor installations. And I've got 10 different videos. I actually have an NTCA video on there, a trial and error about making sure you got enough coverage on the bottom of the tile. But about 4.5 hours worth of content on here that's really, really good. So pedestals, bonded applications, flexible base applications. It's a very, very nice library of topics. And if you bookmark this playlist, I'm going to continue to add to it with time. So you go back to it and see if there's anything new. I'm not doing it frequently, but a couple times a year, probably more content comes up. And that is going to conclude my presentation. So Jim, we're going to open it up for questions, I guess. I'm going to turn on my camera, but first let me put my jacket back on so I'm not sitting here in my t-shirt. And that's it, guys. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Let's move to the questions, please, Jim.
Phil, that was great, fantastic. It is a growing opportunity for NTCA members and tile contractors around the country, and it's fantastic. I have a question before we get to the attendees. So I'm sure there's training for all these different installations, right? How do we find that training, Phil? How do people find this training? I know NTCA is working on a outdoor living kind of program, but how would you find them if you're waiting for ours?
Good question. The first thing I would do was bookmark this playlist that I put up on the last page, because a lot of what we would do in a training is covered on these videos, and we've even got some live job installations going on this. Other than that, it's really kind of up to manufacturers, dealers, distributors to schedule and put on these trainings. So I know that we, Daltile Xteriors program, we're doing a pretty decent amount of these trainings, but typically we're partnering with, say, a local hardscape dealer, right? So like a Site One landscape supplier, Chicago Lurvies, or Prime Building Materials in Southern California. So we would typically do it at one of their locations. And I think the challenge there, Jim, is how do you guys find out about it? So we might have to try to figure out some sort of thing, some sort of mechanism so that your membership gets to know when we're presenting to, hardscape contractor somewhere.
So that's a good point, Phil. So maybe you and I can talk, and we can connect some of this to our members in regards to our e-newsletters and things like that, and
Yeah, right.
information. And I know our training team is really working on coming out with something in the second half of this year or early 2025 in regards to training. So that'll be helpful.
Right.
Great, thank you for that.
Absolutely.
So the first question we have, Phil, can you direct bond the tile over concrete driveway? Okay, these porcelain slabs or these 2cm products. Should I caulk the movement joints and bond over the top? Or do I need to transfer the movement joints to the tile surface and caulk that? Did that make sense?
Yeah, it does. I mean, if you have an expansion joint, you're definitely going to want to have that soft joint there. With movement joint, I'm sorry, not expansion. What am I looking for? Anyways, your typical cut-in movement joints. Yeah, you have to have a soft joint. It doesn't have to be right on it, so you don't have to necessarily, have a cut, through your otherwise, say, running bond field. As long as you're like within half a tile, that next joint can be the soft joint. And I've got a pretty long, or 22-minute educational video on that very topic on this website that I've got, this playlist.
Nick, we'll get this information from Phil, and we'll have make sure that you are able to find all of these videos, and we'll put that out in our e-news or in different avenues. So definitely, that'll be great. Okay, good.
Yeah, great. I appreciate that.
Okay. What kind of characteristics do you look for in the mortar material for exterior installations in areas with low number of freeze-thaw cycles?
And the lower the freeze-thaw cycle, sort of the lower the performance characteristic you have to worry about for your mortar in those cases. Now, I'm 22 years in the hardscape industry. I'm 5 years almost in the tile industry. I'm not an expert on wet set applications or direct bond applications. So probably a better question for, a rep for one of those manufacturers.
Okay.
But they all have a range though. They all have a range for different environments.
Well, I was kind of thrown off a little bit when you showed the freeze-thaw cycles, and you showed like Minnesota not being, way up there, and that is true. Once we freeze, we freeze. We don't do a lot of back and forth. So that's an interesting question, Anthony, and we'll try and get some answers for you. Thank you.
Yeah. So, and to that point, though, I think that it's different if you have low freeze-thaw cycles because you're in a warm climate versus like a Minnesota, Wisconsin, North Dakota, where you don't have many freeze-thaw cycles, but you absolutely have to worry about freezing, right?
Yep, for sure. Yep. So the question is, and I think you've answered it, but why don't you answer it one more time? Where can we find the recorded webinars? So I think I'm going to answer that for Phil. Phil's going to send me this information, and we'll put it out available there. But I also want everyone to know this webinar is, as I mentioned in the very beginning, it is going to be on the NTCA YouTube page. So you can just go into either our website, and there's a little YouTube button, or you can go to YouTube and look up National Tile Contractors Association, and we will have this presentation. And remember this name, that's the big part. If you remember this, it's easy to look up. It's just Take It Outside, Expand Your Business with Outdoor Installations, and you'll get all of this, and you'll get that link right at the bottom there. But we'll also have that link available in the coming days, and short a week or two from now. We'll definitely have that available through e-news or possibly on our website, but we'll definitely have it available to everyone. So,
hey, Jim, real quick for the membership here on the call, when you go look at the video content that I've got saved, most of it I believe is basically not branded. It's not proprietary, but because it's mine, there might be some branding in there. Just a fair warning.
Okay, all right. So we're okay with a little bit of branding. It's not a problem to know where the products are, who has the products. You are coming on and talking about this opportunity for our members, and so to mention that Daltile has a 2cm and outdoor living program, there's nothing wrong with that. So That's
Perfect.
great.
And by the way, there's about a 16-minute long video that has some additional tank footage on it. But the first 10 or 12 minutes is all me talking to the principal of the company, the manufacturer that makes, that underlayment product. So the brand is called Romex. I'm just going to throw that out there for this. There are some others out there, but that'll help you find it when you go onto the website.
Excellent. Well, that's all the questions we have today, Phil. So you did a great job of explaining, and I appreciate it. I appreciate everyone taking the time out of their day to come. We had a great attendance today.
Good.
Thank you. And please look forward to our next webinar that's coming up on February 22nd. You'll have invites coming out shortly. So thanks, everyone. Thanks, Phil. Take care.
Thank you.
All right.
Appreciate you.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye now.